The deal is this. Tell you, when I was a kid, that read Dropper Anton Wilson, all this real. Tell you, when I was a kid, that read Dropper Anton Wilson, all this real. Dude, I'm pissed. Dude, I'm pissed. Come on. What? Okay, by the time we finish this, you're all going to be practicing magician.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And I am Gary Butterfield.
And this is Days of Future Cast. And we are doing something. How does this podcast go, Jerry? It's been a little while, and I've been sick.
It's been a minute, and you're in the ward. You're recording this straight from the vomitorium. This is the podcast where we're talking about Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, issue by issue. And then moving on to talk about other X-Men shit. Because we enjoy the X-Men.
It's true. It's very, very true. We are going to continue this run on New X-Men. I've really enjoying this so far, and we're basically going to start a new arc with the introduction of probably one of the coolest characters that came from this arc, Phantom X.
Coolest characters and coolest, as far as things, at the end of this series, I want to do just a full episode talking about kind of like a little bit of impact, like what stuff did carry forward, like how this changed the X-Men and what stuff we wish had changed the X-Men.
And you felt the best time to approach me with that was on the mic? Good job, Gary.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I approached you on the mic about it previously, too. But I want to, one of the things that is really disappointing to me that no writers ever up and ran is introduced in this episode, which is the world and the weapon program. That is something that gets referenced a couple times, but I think is exceedingly cool.
Yeah, the sheer imagination factor on heating up time to increase how fast it goes, and then introducing human and mutant experimentation into that to see it evolve over millions of years is just completely fascinating. And it's all techno word salad bullshit, but it just lets you do anything. And I'm really surprised that people haven't picked up on this to do just the dumbest shit. I'm surprised we haven't had a second Spider-Man Clone Wars that didn't involve the world somehow, right?
Yeah. This was a gift that Grant Morrison created, and it was just left on the curb, So, and the character you're talking about, Phantom X, who is part of this, I haven't read a lot of Phantom X after the new X-Men stuff. This has, to me, it has a little bit of a feeling of, this being Grant Morrison's, pet character he wants to add, but he's real fun. In these issues, he is very fun. It is genuinely, he's tricky. He lies a lot. And he is he is a cool character.
Yes.
In this. I enjoy him.
I think it could feel a little precious at times. Just with the especially in this issue with all of the French stuff and him taking him to the house and all of that business and just kind of acting a little bit above everything. But then you find out most of that stuff is not actually real, and he's been basically is an experiment himself, and all of a sudden that gets way more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It gets recontextualized. He's the coolest dude in the room, and then you realize it's all a lie.
Exactly,
which I think is a cool thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we're starting with, this arc starts in issue 128, which I think has a really awesome cover, as far as just the pinup, iconic character covers.
Yeah.
Real good drawing of Jean Grey presenting us with a phoenix.
Yeah. Hey, here's this bird that I'm named after.
Here you are. Yeah, here's some force. Here, have some incomparable cosmic power.
What would the Gary bird look like? Have you ever thought about that? If you put yourself in this position?
Yeah, like the pocket force or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just the, maybe one of those puffins with the big eyebrows.
Okay,
those guys. They're fat.
I think mine would just have to be a basset hound at this point.
Sure.
Yeah. It's just
mine would definitely be a cat, but if it were a bird, it might be one of those. But it'd definitely be one of those the cat from there are two of them meme, one of those badass
oh yeah.
It's great. So this cover looks great. Totally different artist. We're back in the Igor Cordy hole though.
Yes.
Just so everyone knows.
And boy, does everything look kind of terrible, and it's hard to determine what's going on constantly.
Yep.
I'm going to get all of my complaints out. Actually, no, that's not true. I'm going to get some of my complaints out now, and they bring them up more as I think about them, because like there are times in these 3 issues that I am just like astounded by how bad something looks.
Yeah, he's not good at art and he's not good at characters. Like we talked about, every once in a while he pulls off a decent frame. We've talked a lot about how he's being rushed through this. Like it's only kind of his fault, but like ultimately, we talked about this. They don't remaster comics. I would love to see this arc done with Frank Whiteley.
Oh yeah.
Specifically, there are some things, some action scenes of Phantom X that just like the We 3 Frank Whiteley would have fucking murdered.
Oh yeah.
Like would have just looked so good. And it's hard because he's introducing a lot of new characters. This has some like ancillary X-Men stuff, and it's hard when you're dealing with recognizable characters to have an artist who is so consistently off model.
Yeah. And it's especially with some of this stuff, because like there are times where, especially with the 3 or 4 women characters from the little side X-Men team, he draws them so that they all look alike. So I don't know whether it's Monet or Darkstar or whoever who is talking. Every once in a while, like somebody has an accent, and I'm like, oh, that's Siren. So okay, that's where we are with that. But yeah, it's really difficult to tell people apart,
especially since almost all of their scenes take place in a dark tunnel.
Yes. Yeah.
It's real tricky. And like, it's weird because you can tell the script of this, the visual language of the writing, if you remember the Don't At Me thing, like we recognize that writing also deals with like scenes and stuff, not just dialogue, is actually really good. One of the things in rereading these issues that I find that I really love is the pace of cutting back and forth between the 2 sets of characters. Like it feels very cinematic to me. It's like very like much like a TV show. Like a character will mention something and there'll just be these very dramatic drops. Like, oh yeah, and by the way, most of your team is probably dead. And then we cut over to a scene of chaos in the tunnels. Yeah. And that's a really cinematic, like really cool visual medium trick that would be carried better by better art.
Yes, 100%. So we start with Charles Xavier looking very much like someone squished Spider Jerusalem and put him in a big suit, and basically saying, my name is Charles Xavier, and I am a mutant. And he's given this speech, and he's in France. And I guess outside, like we're seeing these like mutant and human riots, humans versus mutants, like that are happening in the streets. While he's basically saying like, "Hey, we're gonna reopen the X Corps. We're gonna get if there's an emergency, all you have to do is think the word X, and we're gonna rush out and we're gonna help you free of charge."
Yeah. Yep. Through Cerebra, this riot's real serious. Like people are getting set on fire and shit. And we cut over to a locker room where our ancillary team here, like during this period of the X-Men, the idea was after Joe Casey's run of X-Men, which had Banshee setting up something called the X Corporation. This is the X Corps, a version of that where the idea is there's so many X-Men and so many different, X-Force, X-Factor, different people have been on the team. These people will be little like closet teams. In different areas. So this is the one in France. And they're just kind of talking about it. And we get some like old former Generation X and New Mutant characters and stuff that are kind of fun to see. Like, what have these guys been up to? Jack and shit.
I am anytime Jamie Madrox shows up, I am here for it.
Yeah. He's, and in this version, the way that Grant Morrison writes these characters, it's not like I feel like he has a great handle on any of these characters individually. Like I think he wanted some red shirts, kind of, and he gives them all this weird kind of party ironic voice that I think semi works. Like I think it works. I don't think it's perfect. Like if I were like, let's say I was a huge Richter fan, there are dozens of us. Like there's got to be somebody out there who just loves Richter, right?
Hold on, I'm looking at r/Richter right now. Let me see what I can get.
If you're a big Richter fan, like this doesn't really sound like this doesn't need to be Richter. This could be anybody.
Sure.
Like at this point, who's in that thing. He doesn't even use his powers during like the whole thing. He doesn't say anything only Richter would say or use his powers. There's one weird throwaway line about him being psychically immune to the big boss that I think never actually comes up again. But he has a weird kind of sense of this team. If you can like blur your eyes and just think like, oh, it's just miscellaneous X-Men and they're having fun, because they're kind of young and they're kids and they're used to doing this, like it ends up making sense. you kind of just have to like push through the part of me that's like, oh, I know Cannonball.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I know what Cannonball's like. So
they do.
We're in this locker room.
Yeah, we're kind of introduced to that concept too of like Jamie Madrox basically said, yeah, I feel terrible. Like you would think that if I could split myself into multiple people, like my hangover would be reduced, but actually we all have the same exact hangover. Like, why are we doing this the night after we all went mental on the dance floor? And I'm like, all right,
yeah,
that's definitely something that a UK comic, I mean, a guy from the US would definitely say.
Yeah, like just Grant Morrison going clubbing, which is like I'm sure just very much his life here. They're all suiting up because they have an emergency mission. They have this train wreck in the channel tunnel. There are passengers stranded.
Yes.
And they find, the reason why X Corporation got the call is because there is a gene hazard. And nobody's really clear on exactly what that means, but our little sub team here, we got Darkstar, who I don't know if I read a comic with Darkstar. She's Russian. Monet from Generation X, Multiple Man, originally from X Factor, and in the very good like miniseries that we'll have to read at some point for the show.
Yeah.
Madrox,
Mm-hmm.
Richter and Siren, and Cannonball from X Force.
Yes. I don't know, on the like third page or so, just speaking of Darkstar, like what is she doing in this second panel on the left hand side? Like, is she throwing up? Is that what's happening right now?
She drank some water and she doesn't like it.
What is like the face here? And then on the third panel on the right hand side, like now she just doesn't have a face.
It. But she has a jacket now. She's still in the same pose, but she's like formed a jacket. And Jean Grey is pulling like a communion wafer or like a birth control circle.
Yeah, I didn't understand what
from
was
a
happening
vending
with
machine
that at all.
Cordy, I need you to fucking get it together, man.
Like try to think about this locker room as like a place, right? Like it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like it's just such bad blocking throughout all of this.
Have your people doing something, like I don't know. Just it's like when every once in a while you see a TV show where like you'll see an actor in the background and they're doing like a bit of business with their hands and they're really overdoing it, because they just have something to do, and like somebody is just like flipping a cane back and forth like a little too enthusiastically, and you're like, okay, like I understand it's hard to know what to do with your hands when you're acting, but like you're drawing, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
So we cut over to them, walking up the stairs, still talking about that. Like they basically get their mission and they're bantering. Like the idea is you just get people out. You guys know what you do. You guys have been doing this for years. We'll get you guys linked up as soon as we get Cerebro ready. And the goal is to get people out. They have this little bit where they start talking about their code names and like, I don't really understand what this is.
Okay,
like,
good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't understand this at all because they started talking about gladiator names or something.
Know what that means.
Yeah, me either. This has to be like something that was going on at the time, maybe like
or like X Corp. Like maybe X Corp had that. Because I never read the Joe Casey run that this is reacting to, so maybe that's what it is.
It could definitely be just like making fun of something previous to come. But this made no sense to me when I was reading it any time that I have read it. So
yeah, I don't understand it. We cut over to Jean and Professor X talking, and Jean Grey, again, those really great panels where she's just sitting back and doing cool stuff with telekinesis, making Professor Xavier a mineral water with lime. As Professor Xavier talks about how good it is, like, hey, we came out, and went public, and now people are actually listening to us and taking us seriously. Like, yes, there are these riots, but there is some goodwill. Like Jean says, combining this goodwill tour with a branding exercise has pretty much put the old feared and hated routine, put away the old fear and hated routine.
Yes. And Xavier's basically saying like this was the right step, and he's like, she's like, wait a minute, you kind of sound like Cassandra Nova, and Xavier's like, you know what, she was right on this one, like she knew what the next step was, and I was always too afraid to do it. Which is again, like this is the strength of writing a good villain, is that where you can, hey, Magneto made some valid points or whatever, right? Like
exactly.
Cassandra Nova had a couple of good ideas that were like, oh wait, like maybe we should be not so strict in our, like maybe we need to take off the scary mask and just be people, be like not human beings, but be people.
Yeah, him saying that, like, I see her as an agent of nature that was testing us. Like almost like just, the same way that like a great disease or a flood or a natural disaster, might put you under pressure and cause you to innovate. The reason why they're hanging out here is Jean has asked Professor X to like look into her powers, and she said, well, everyone thinks I'm going to turn into a monster. I basically need to tell Scott that I'm not evil.
I need you to tell my husband that I'm not turning evil is a weird thing to say to the guy that's probably
Yeah.
kind of sexually into you.
in the canonically, it's what caused Onslaught. These 4 issues do a lot of good work with Jean and Scott's relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is like the beginning of the cracks in that in a really cool way. All the writing there is really deft. And again, these cinematic cuts, like that's a great like wham line to cut over to our introduction to Phantom X.
Yes.
Who is being chased by soldiers.
Yeah. This is going to be like some sort of international like soldier crew or whatever, like that have just been given permission to hunt this dude down.
Yeah.
And I like this because the dialogue here is kind of like awkward. Like the guy was like, maybe he's gone and we can all go home and watch the European Cup final. And like nobody's like, it's the Euro, my man. Like we're gonna watch the Euro. What are you doing? Like I feel like Grant Morrison should know that. And like a Marvel editor was like, no, you have to be more specific than the Euro or something, right? Like because it's so weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, Phantom X just like jumps down from on high and murders all of these dudes and some really like ugly looking art.
Yeah. The blocking does not look good. They do a thing when Phantom X moves where they draw like little shadows behind him, like a blur, to show that he's moving really fast, which I think is a cool effect that the artist does not sell.
Yeah. And also, like the panel at the top right where the bullet is almost about to hit the guy, like the bullet conveys no sense of motion whatsoever. So it looks like the guy is just like scared of a bullet or something. Like it
looks like it's like resting on it, like he cried it.
It looks like he's just literally crying bullets. Yeah,
crying bullets. The Phantom X story. So we cut back over to Jean and Professor X, and they're basically discussing this new Phoenix Force. Like, Professor X is saying, like, listen, what you did with my brain, like cutting it into pieces and putting it back together, no one should be possible for that. Nobody should be able to do that. Like, that's impossible. And she's like, well, if I can think it's possible. Like, that word doesn't exist in my vocabulary. Like, I can see more of everything. I feel great. And he gets out this set of silverware and they start doing this experiment. And the scene, I really love this scene. I think it's very cool. As just like a talking kind of slow scene.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She starts lifting the forks and spoons and knives into kind of a crown around her in these patterns. And Professor Xavier says like, listen, and he reaches out and touches the fork and like, can you feel this? And she's like, yeah. Like, I didn't know I could do that, but I can feel it. I can feel your pulse.
Yeah. Super fascinating.
Steel.
Yeah, that's like a whole other level. Because this starts out with like, oh, this is beginner telekinesis, like just lifting some stuff and like making patterns. And he's like, no, we're going to do some cooler stuff than that. Yeah. And like the idea that she can feel that much through the stuff that she is handling is kind of terrifying. Like Jean Grey should be. Jean Grey should be terrifying at all times in my mind.
Yeah. He basically, and he says like this sensitivity is known as the manifestation of the Phoenix to the neuro-mystical surgeons of the Shi'ar Empire.
Okay.
Which you can just say Phoenix Force. we were all there. Like nobody's reading this who has not read the Dark Phoenix saga.
Dial it down, Charles. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And a great, like, again, just like wham panel, like he says, the Phoenix was bad news. Like, last time that happened, people died. We don't want that to happen. And she's like, it's not like that. Like, this feels really, really different. And they kind of do some psychobabble, like, it's colors on fire in every direction. And when, Professor Xavier touches her mind, he feels like he's on an ocean of psychic light, all this stuff.
Totally into this, by the way. Like, I'm usually not here for the psychic jargon too much, but wow, like this all, like, colors on fire burning in every direction is so evocative. Like, that's super fucking cool.
It's cool. And there's, again, this like wham panel. Professor X says, Jean, can I talk to the Phoenix? We get a drawing of the Phoenix sitting back. She's formed the forks and knives into a Phoenix crest along with her hair that's on fire. And says, Jean is only the house where I live, Charles. Which is like chilling and awesome.
Yes.
When I first read this, I was certain that like the big bad was going to be the Phoenix. And I think one of the coolest things that Grant Morrison does with the whole run is subvert that expectation, right? Like, you think you're going to end up with a Dark Phoenix story, but the Phoenix as a force for like ultimately good, and the thing that in the end of this, when we go into the future and like the Phoenix burns away that timeline that we're dealing with is like ultimately like the benevolent Phoenix is one of the gifts, I guess, that like Grant Morrison gave the franchise with us.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. Is like, and because up till now, like the Phoenix was it was a force for evil, essentially, even though it was written as a cosmic force, which should have no real intention for good and evil. It had always had done bad things to the X-Men. Yeah.
Yeah. People always died. So we cut over, we go into where the Phoenix lives. Like they're in this like post-apocalyptic psychic escape on a big pile of dead X-Men. One of the things I love, Igor Cordy, I'll give him shout outs where he deserves them. There's this fire hydrant that's just spewing blood.
Yeah, very good.
That's
very, very
great.
good. Like, as a guy that sells fire hydrants, let me tell you, the amount of blood you would have to do this. Like, Gary, these things are not like, those things put out about 200 gallons per minute. So just imagine.
Yeah, 200 gallons of blood per minute.
Yeah. The BPM of all that is very, very high.
Yeah. Your blood pressure is 4,000 over 90.
But yes, he's so she's like, he's basically asking like, is this the future? Is this what's happening? And she says, no, it's not a place. It's how it feels to be the last hope and to know that you'll win against all odds. It's the wing of the phoenix touching your heart with flame. Which is kind of just like Phoenix jargon that I don't really get down with as much as I like the psychic jargon from earlier. But it doesn't matter because like during this conversation, they're interrupted by like several helicopters outside of the window, which is like an X-Men thing if there's ever been.
I think the idea is supposed to be that we can't understand the Phoenix. Like, I think that when Grant Morrison is giving it that like psycho magic kind of speak, he's trying to portray something that is beyond human understanding. Sure. Which is what the Phoenix is always meant to be, but they, have never really gotten across. So they cut over to the helicopter, and then from the shadows, Phantom X is there. He says, my apologies. I'm afraid it's me they want. You can't read my mind. And one of my favorite lines, I heard your speech on TV and I decided to put you in a morally compromising position.
I love it. So fucking good.
Good line.
Man, can I just complain about cross-eyed Jean on the page previous? Like,
oh my goodness. Like, you can.
Wow. Those eyes are going in two totally different directions, my man. Like, art is hard. Gene. Art is very, very hard, and you shouldn't hurt yourself trying to do it well. But goddamn, you're a Marvel book. Yeah. Let them have a month. You know what I'm saying? They delayed Cyberpunk. Let this go another month.
This is what crunch looks like.
Exactly.
Tying into Cyberpunk, like this was crunch. Like Igor Cordy was getting crunched. So he asked for asylum. He's like, I want what it says on the tin. I'm a mutant. I demand sanctuary.
Mm-hmm. They can't read his mind because he has thought-proof ceramic panels on his head. And he introduces himself as the most notorious mutant criminal in Europe. Yep.
Then we cut over to the away team. They're still kind of bantering at this point. Like on the jet, Jimmy Madrox was singing "Justify My Love" and like harmonizing with himself. Everyone's talking about. They're just kind of goofing. They're talking about like, hey, somebody says, hey, have you ever had an orgy with yourself?
And I'm like, hey, can you stop taking Days of Future Cast bits over here? That's archaic.
We gotta get Siren to be our third host. Like, So Monet is a stick in the mud because that's she's like out of all these people, she's the only one who acts like herself.
Yes,
I feel like Grant Morrison read one issue of Generation X. And knew what Monet was like because she's like real stodgy.
Yeah, and they're headed into the tunnel. When we go back over to Jean and Xavier, who were talking to Phantom X, and Jean just says like, "Oh, they're terrified of him because they don't really know what he can do." And Phantom X says, "Oh, I'm a thief. I stole something, but in that train is something called Weapon 12, and also your emergency team is already dead." And I love this weird thing that Phantom X does, which is just pour liquid over his head instead of drinking water. He
doesn't drink it; he pours it on his head.
Yeah. That's a very Doom Patrol thing that I can really get into.
Doom Patrol is a really good watch point, kind of like marker for that.
Mm-hmm.
And him saying your team's already dead. Again, we get this very cinematic cut over to just chaos in the tunnels, and they're fighting each other as well. So we see this is Darkstar has been infected here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually see that because Igor Cordy is not great at blocking stuff. But we know because of later and because Siren is attacking her, everyone is screaming fall back and everyone's saying there's hundreds of them. Don't let them touch you. Don't let them touch you. We don't really know what this looks like. The blocking in the tunnel is just like, let's draw chaos, and he does draw chaos. The idea here is all the humans and different multiple men that have been infected are all fighting amongst themselves.
I wish this was like 40% better. Like,
Oh yeah,
because it feels
Yeah.
like what I like X-Men, like horror stuff via X-Men is something I can get into. Like the trailer for New Mutants finally came out, like the New Mutants or whatever they're going to call that movie. And like there's a vibe to that which I can really get down with. Like I'm kind of interested in to see like what a modern horror movie via the X-Men kind of prism would look like. And there's something to that here, but everything just looks like mush, so it comes up not being scary at all.
You can see how it would work in a movie. Like the idea is that it's bathed in this like a red emergency light the entire time, and I think this could be very striking. Like, the other thing I was thinking about was like John Cassaday drawing this. Not just to draw, just pull like the two of the best X-Men artists out of nowhere, but like just the way that he has done, like did red shaded, like, scenes that are bathed in a single color of light. That's a tricky thing to do for a comics artist and an inker, and like it could be very effective. And here it just kind of doesn't work super well.
And then for our penultimate page, we switch to something completely different, which is Cyclops sitting down in a chair. And it's one of those like 8-panel, like someone's going to walk up while they're talking and sit down and talk to somebody else. But it's Cyclops basically not necessarily complaining about, but discussing the problems that him and Jean are having, or that he has with his and Jean's relationship. Namely that like he feels kind of bottled up, like specifically she ran around in a corset for everyone, but with me sensible shoes and roll necks. But like he even right after that says, I don't know, like maybe that doesn't even matter to me, but like maybe it does, I have no idea. Like he has changed so much, and he knows that he loves Jean, but he has no idea how to love Jean as he currently is. Which is like a fucking real thing. Like it's a fascinating approach to this. Like, and he even says like they were faking this teenage unconditional love in the face of unstoppable chaos and change. But like now we're adults and we have to deal with one another. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
And he says like our lives seem so straight and safe now. The idea that like a relationship can be heightened by being under constant threat. I am a person who has fallen out of love. If I imagine myself at that moment of falling out of love and Sentinels attacked me and my ex-girlfriend, I would be as in love as I possibly have ever been. Like during that moment, right? Like it's like, no. Like those parts of your brain and those parts of your heart that need other people can flex and relax, and kind of what he's describing here of like, yeah, we're really good under pressure. And now that we know how to do it, like we don't know how to enter the real world. Like I don't know how to live not in crisis with this person. That's a really real thing, I think.
And even like remove the superpowers and the X-Men bullshit from this. And when he says, I'm not who I was and I can't seem to tell her who I am in case she hates what I've become. Like that's I have witnessed that with like my parents and just them changing over time and like sticking with one another for apparently no reason. Not necessarily my parents, because my parents divorced when I was 1, but like my mom and step parents and all that kind of stuff situation. But like that thing where you can change and then all of a sudden you realize like, oh wait, I'm just not here for this anymore. And then Sentinels attack and you're desperately in love again.
Well, or like look at like Midsummer, right? Like she has that huge tragedy and he can't break up with her. That's the essential like mistake of that movie. And like that is, again, it's just very well observed. A tragedy relationship where there's no tragedy about. We cut over to reveal who he's talking to, which is Emma Frost, like real titty hanging out.
Oh man, I'm kind of here for sexy Emma Frost, like I always have been. Like I think that like she kind of owns her sexuality in a way that like very few other characters, like as they are written, seem to own. Like there's a very early panel in this where like you can see the side boob of Siren as she's changing into her work uniform, and I'm like, well, that's not something that like Siren or this person would ever do. Like, right? She's just not going to be hanging boob in the middle of this like locker room. And this is just not great, Gary. Like, how are you going to make Emma Frost look kind of ugly? Like, what are you doing?
It's all in the face. It's real weird. She's got Joker face.
She's got Joker face, Gary. You're absolutely right.
Like they give her the Joker smile, and it's pretty gratuitous. Like they wanted to make her really sexy, so like they draw her nipples pointing through her leather boob cups.
Oh yeah, they super do, don't they? Yeah.
And it's just like they just went really extra with it, and it just kind of comes off as greasy and unsavory in a way that is semi, probably intentional because she is meant to be like a seductress in this, but it's not. I don't love it.
Yeah, me either.
But I do love this subplot of Scott and Emma throughout this entire series, but they, really starting in this set of issues.
Yep. And that's the last page for this issue. So if you have enjoyed this podcast, actually, but before we get into the end, like what a great start to this arc. Like, as much as we kind of diss the art throughout this, like, this story is super interesting. Like, the idea of, like, we're going to send some X-Men down here to go save something, but something's not quite right. And, like, who is this Phantom X character? And, like, knowing where all of this goes is just super, super fascinating. Like, I can't wait to get to the end.
It's a mystery, like, story, which is pretty cool. Like, there are elements of this that I think on first, we talked about this early on first glance, that I don't think are that cool, right? Like, if Phantom X was literally a Mary Sue and everything he's saying was true, I would think it was lame. If he just came up and he's like, yeah, I'm a supernaturally handsome mega thief. I've just managed to stay under your radar, the entire history of the X-Men. I've just stayed under your radar, who have Cerebro. His story doesn't add up. And then once you find out, like, yeah, it's fake. I just popped out of a weird secret government thing the same way as this other thing did. And, like, I'm actually part of the lineage of Wolverine. Like, I made a weapon, but I'm deciding not to be a weapon anymore. It's a way more relatable story. And the fact that you get that stuff kind of teased out throughout the issue does a lot to make this character that otherwise would just be a cool design and power set actually be a lot more interesting, I think.
Yeah, me too. Here for Phantom X, I'm actually really looking forward to discussing, because I read ahead a bit again, because I can't stop. I have a thing with reading the series. As I start reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, I might as well go ahead and just finish the next 20 issues. What am I doing with my life? But the issue with him and Cyclops and Wolverine, like later on in this arc, is super great.
All the Chris and that actually has one of my, I don't know how controversial it is. I always get the sense that it is, but as far as artists that I think are not great at blocking and stuff, I am so in the pocket for Chris Bacallo. Like, ever since I read him on Generation X, like, I've always loved Chris Bacallo's art, and it's not always clear exactly what's happening, and in the World arc, it is not exactly clear what's happening, like, at every given moment. But the individual images just look so cool to me that I will follow Chris Bacallo to a lot of dumb places. I give him a lot of slack, so. He's one of, in a vacuum, he's one of my favorite artists that works on this series. Good shit.
Yeah, you'll just have to wait like 20-something episodes for that, everybody.
Yeah, it'll be a while, but that's only 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, if you like this, go head on over to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. You get 4 episodes in a bundle every 2 weeks, as opposed to getting them eked out. You also get a bunch of other stuff, and you can also leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, please do all of that. Thank you to the people that have done that, and thank you to the people that have said super, super nice things about the change in format. We very much appreciate it. We'll be back in a little while with more of the new X-Men. See you later, folks.
These are the tales of the